Happy Friday, everyone. I'm excited to bring you another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. My guest today is author JT Ellison. She has a great many number of books under her belt. Her latest release, Her Dark Lies, just came out a couple weeks ago and is a really awesome mystery. If you guys know her, you know she does mystery really well, and this one is no different. So she chats with me a little bit about her journey to this point, to having so many books published and having this latest one come out into the world. Gives some really great query tips, tells us a little bit about her revision process, and of course, shares her favorite book right now. So let's go ahead and get started. JT, can you tell me all about your 24th novel, Her Dark Lies?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So Her Dark Lies is the story of a young artist named Clara Hunter she's kind of made it, right? She's met the man of her dreams, a slightly older man. He's incredibly wealthy. He's the son of basically, think Bill Gates' family, right? Wow. So the Compton Computer Company, they're some of the richest people in the world, and they have arms everywhere. And she's kind of hit the lottery, fallen in love with this guy, Jack Compton, who adores her and wants nothing more than to see her succeed. And as the book opens, they're getting ready to be married on his family's private Italian island called Isola. And everything goes terribly wrong, as it has to, because it's a JT Ellison novel.
Right. Well, wonderful. I mean, how exciting. I will say the cover of this book is just beautiful. Like, you want to be on that cliff, on that in that fancy house for sure. I feel like that's probably a good representation of it.
I agree. I love the cover. It's some of the most exciting artwork I've had my entire career. I think it's going to be really engaging for people, and hopefully the story hooks them in as well. I mean, what's better than a destination wedding that goes awry?
Yes, I mean, that just sounds like a disaster for sure. Well, how exciting. I mean, you've had this will be your 24th published novel. Tell me a little bit about your journey throughout and how it feels to have this book come out into the world.
It's always so exciting and so nerve-wracking. It's at this point, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the readers.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you've lived with a book in your head and you lived with these characters, and part of the process that I love the most is when we start doing PR and I get to come back and revisit everybody. And I've usually got a little altitude on it at this point as well. But so I started writing when I was a kid and thought that I was going to be a writer, and got a degree in creative writing. Was going to go for my MFA, and my professor told me I wasn't good enough to get published and did not give me a recommendation for a graduate program. And I quit writing. I was a double major in politics and creative writing. So I went the politics route and worked in DC and worked in the White House and the Department of Commerce, and then ended up in aerospace marketing, all things that I was not at all trained for. And when we moved back to Nashville, I really wanted to try writing again. I had read the John Sanford series, the Praise series, and something in it just really kind of clicked. And I was like, all right, it's been 8 years. I'm going to try. And I wrote that first paragraph and just started to cry because I was home. I was finally back doing what I was supposed to do. That was in 2003, and I then wrote what I thought was a book, which was actually a novella. Sent it all over New York. It did everything you could possibly do wrong,
right?
Because I was in a vacuum. I didn't know any of the rules of the game. I had never met an author. I really was truly writing in a vacuum and working in a vacuum. I finally went to a book signing. John Connolly came to Nashville, and I went to the book signing, and there I met him, which was incredible, and he became a nice mentor for me. And I also met a woman who was very involved in Sisters in Crime, and she said, hey, you know, do you have a critique group? Are you in Sisters in Crime? And I'm like, what is all of that? So she kind of adopted me and really, you know, kind of steered me in the right direction. And I realized, oh, okay, I need to actually write a full-length novel, which I did. And that novel landed me an agent, but the book didn't sell. And so he said, you know, hey, write me another book, which, you know, when you've spent the past 2.5 years trying to do that, you know, it was very disheartening. And all of those old voices from my early days with the professor who said, you know, you're not good enough, those all popped back up. But I had the bug, you know, I've been bit by the writing bug at that point. And so I wrote him a new book, and that was All the Pretty Girls. And it came out in 2007, and I haven't looked back.
Wow. I mean, that's such an incredible, you know, journey. And you really definitely went from like wanting to get an FMA to like something completely different, lots of different things that you did. But, you know, I'm sure as you look back, you learned from each thing, and you've learned from each manuscript that you've written. But, you know, I'm definitely glad that you found the writing bug, you were bitten. And I feel like once you get bit by the writing bug, like there's no going back. It's like a terminal illness. You will be with it forever.
That is exactly right. It's and you know, you've got to love writing, and you've got to write for yourself first. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be able to have a career and reach people as long as you're writing what you know is your passion and your heart and your soul. That's what works.
Definitely, because I do feel like when you try and write to meet the popularity wave of whatever's out there, or you write what you think people are going to want, it's just not, it doesn't ring as true, I don't think. I think you got to write the book of your heart, whatever that book is at that time. Yep,
that's very true. I mean, you can write to the market, and that's a great way to make money and everything. But I think if you really want to have happiness and sustainability, you've got to write what turns your crank and what makes you happy, and what you're excited to get up in the morning and get to the computer to write.
Definitely. I love that. Well, looking back on your journey and you know, having years and years of experience in the publishing industry, what would your like maybe top tips for writers who are querying right now be?
Follow the rules. That would be the first one. You know, find out exactly who is representing the kind of work that you're writing. Do your research. The thing is, everybody thinks that there's a secret handshake into publishing, and there's not. There are no shortcuts. You have to do your research, figure out who represents the kind of work that you're interested in. I always recommend Publishers Marketplace for that. I think that's a really great resource. It lists all of the deals. Publishers Weekly does as well, but Publishers Marketplace has a really searchable database of, you know, okay, you've written, I don't know, whatever you've written, you can go and look that up and figure out who represents what you do. And then you go to their website and you see what their submission rules are.
Yeah.
Everybody's slightly different. What they want is what they want. You know, if they're saying, send me 5 pages, and you're sending the manuscript, that's immediately going to be a knock against you. You know, you never want to give anyone a chance to say no. Don't give them a reason. Why give them a reason off the bat? And it's hard. It's really hard to get people's attention. So if you follow the rules, you also have to be submitting something that is stellar. It's great work. You've had it edited. You've had it read. You haven't just, you know, written it for NaNoWriMo and then you're popping it off to an agent.
Please don't do that.
No, you have to do your due diligence and do your homework and make sure, you know, you've done all the things you possibly can. Obviously, having a little bit of a platform doesn't hurt. I don't think it's necessary. I truly, truly believe that a great query letter and a great story are going to catch the attention of the right person for your work.
Definitely.
And then just remember that all good books find a home. That's what John Connolly told me all those years ago when I was getting ready to query. And he was right.
That is great advice too. That's a great thing to remember. And yeah, I definitely think that the research is key and following the rules. I've talked to many agents, and I feel like sometimes people try to break the rules to stand out, to be like, oh, this will be so different. They'll look at it, but I think it more than likely jars the agent as they're reading all these queries. They get confused, like, what's going on here? Why is this not what I asked for? So yeah, following the rules and doing the research, while it can add time onto the process, is so worth it, I think.
It really is. I mean, publishing is not exactly a immediate thing anyway.
Yeah.
So, taking an extra couple of weeks on your submission to make sure you're sending it to the right people, and you are, just that it's as polished as it can possibly be. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And you want that first impression to be just off the charts, and you do that by giving the best work in the format that they want.
Yeah. I think, though, like you said in your journey to being published, your first thing that you wrote, which was more of a novella, you sent off. And I think we all do that. We all make that mistake at one point where as we're in the beginning of our journey, like we send something off that's too, just not ready. I did that before. I wrote my first full-length novel when I was in high school, and I thought it was like going to be an instant bestseller, and so I queried it, which now makes me want to like cry a little bit inside. I don't think I said it to that many people, but I think we all make those mistakes. But yeah, if you cannot make that mistake, that is a good thing to do.
Sure. And the second you send that query, you're going to realize there's a typo on the first page of the manuscript, and you're going to be tempted to send them another manuscript. And, I'll tell you, if it makes you feel any better, that happens even 23, 24 manuscripts in. The minute you submit something, you see the mistake that you missed. It's like, oh, no, don't use that file. Use this one instead. Yeah,
right.
It's, we're all human, and everybody understands that. Everybody, they want you to succeed. They're looking for the thing that's going to light them up and make them excited. And you have that. That's what you have. So, it's, everybody needs to take a breath. It's so hard. It's just so hard. It's a hard process.
It's a hard process, but I think it definitely prepares you for the other hard processes that are part of the publishing industry. Like, your first book didn't sell. I think that, that's something that happens to more authors than we know. And
sure.
I think querying and the slowness of everything is good to prepare yourself for the slowness of publishing. But then, realizing that too, once you get an agent, your book might not sell, and you might have to work on something different, is a good reminder too.
Sure. I mean, I got lucky that my second book sold. That doesn't often happen. I mean, a lot of people query for years and write book after book after book, and there's a word for a published author, and that's perseverance.
Yeah.
I got lucky. I got really lucky. Everything hit just at the right time. The market was looking for what I was selling, and all of that. It just was, I don't want to say a fluke, but it was certainly luck.
Yeah, and that's sometimes I feel like it's part of the whole process too. Is if the agent that you're querying reads the query on a certain day when they're really going to connect with it, or depending on what other queries are in the inbox, like there's so much, I feel like, luck that goes into the process, unfortunately.
It is. I mean, publishing is what? So 1% of people querying get an agent, and 1% of those get a deal?
Yeah.
Is that what the numbers are? I mean, it's certainly there's a barrier to entry, which is why independent publishing, self-publishing, and I mean, that's a very viable and legitimate way to get your work out there.
Definitely.
There is no one right way up the mountain. That's the most important thing to remember.
Yeah. Well, We could probably talk about querying the whole entire interview. But I do have another question for you. My next question's a two-parter. I'd love to know, for you, what is the hardest part of writing, and then what is the hardest part of being an author?
Gosh, the hardest part of writing is the revision process, which it should be, right? Drafting is fun.
Yeah.
Revising is hard. And that's the important part. That's, for me, finding the timeline and all of those little details that I've messed up, names that I've changed, or
yes.
people's eye colors have
yes.
changed, silly things like that. But the revision is where I am looking at just the structure of the paragraph. I'm like, wow, this is out of order. And learning how to do that, it is not something that you just can figure out by yourself, which is why I always recommend getting, a beta read. And if you can afford having an editor actually look at your work, that's really helpful to learn how to do that, to learn how to revise, to learn how to realize when things are out of order, when you've repeated the same word 4 times on the page. So that's probably the hardest thing as far as writing goes. The hardest part of being a writer, oh my gosh, it's such a great job. It's really, it's I have a friend that says I'm weeping off the back of my yacht. It's not a horrible job, right? Being an author is kind of an awesome job, and it's a lot of fun. I think the hardest part is when something doesn't connect with a reader and they don't understand what you were trying to do, and they get really upset and they send you nasty emails. That's never cool. But at the same time, you've struck a nerve with somebody, so that's cool on the other side of it. I don't know, it's hard to let the books go, to decide, okay, it's done, this is as good as it can be, and I'm gonna let people read it. It's not easy, and you just never know what the feedback's gonna be.
And I think what you said earlier about the books, like once they're published, they're not yours anymore. You're giving them to the readers, and that, I've heard from other authors too, like that's hard because there will be people who love them, but then there will be those who didn't connect with them. But they should not be sending you mean emails. That's silly.
I've knock on wood, I've gotten very few over the years,
good.
and most of them were misunderstandings that were easily cleared up with a response. Then they went, oh, oops, I didn't read that right. And they go back and read it and they're like, oh, it didn't say that, did it? I've been, people misunderstanding who I am or thinking I'm somebody that I'm not. I've had a little bit of that. It's usually a good way to start a conversation with somebody. I've always, everybody's got their likes and dislikes, and it's a free country. You're allowed to like and dislike what you want and what you don't. So I'm not going to try to change your mind. But if you write me and say something specific and I think you're wrong, I'm going to write you back and say, you know what? Let's just talk about this for a second.
They opened the door at that point, right?
You opened the door. Exactly. You can always tell when it's somebody that wants to have a conversation and somebody who's just in a bad mood that day. And it's like, I hope you feel better. I'm sorry. Sorry I disappointed you. I hope you got that off your chest.
Yes.
Glad.
Well, let me flip this question. So instead of the hardest parts, tell me the best part of being a writer and being an author.
Gosh. So the best part of being a writer are those moments when I've sat down at the computer and I look up and it's hours later and I've written thousands of words and the story has gone in a direction that I wasn't expecting when I sat down that day. That's the best moment. It's really exciting to get in that flow and that groove and see what comes of it. The best part of the rest of it is getting to talk to readers, to have something land with them and to get a note from somebody that says, my mom was dying and I sat by her bedside and read your book and it took me out of it for a few moments. Or, I'm getting chemotherapy and it's really taken my mind off of what's going on. those, it's the most humbling thing in the world to think that something that you've written could actually lift somebody out of a situation that is sad or uncomfortable, or dangerous even.
Yeah.
I've had people who got help after being in abusive relationships from something they've read in a book. That's incredibly powerful and hands down the coolest thing ever.
Definitely. I mean, I think, I feel like so much personally that writing does for us as the writer, right? Like for me, it's always been very therapeutic just for myself, but then there is also the desire that what I've written will connect with somebody and provide that relief, that escape from their life, whether they, are in a terrible spot or just want to escape for the day, because reading is fun that way. But, I'm sure that those stories will never get old. Having people reach out and share that with you is got to be wonderful every single time it happens.
For sure. I mean, even somebody that says, I read the book in a day.
Yeah.
It took me a year to write it, and you read it in 24 hours. But that's awesome. That means you've captured them, right?
Yeah.
There's something about it. And that's, that Stephen King calls it a psychic connection between the author and the reader. It doesn't matter when I wrote it. When you read it, we're connected. And it's just, I love that idea. It's very cool.
I love that. That is definitely, the best thing about reading, for sure. So you said that one of the things you love most about writing is drafting, right? Like that's such a fun process for you. When you're drafting, do you find yourself as more of a pantser, more of a planner, or somewhere in between?
So it depends. It depends on what I'm writing. Standalones, I have to plan. I have to have at least some idea of what I'm doing. And the series books are much easier to just sit down and let it flow. You've already got the characters in the world, and it's really more a situation of plot with a series novel versus the standalone. You have to create everything from scratch, including the plot.
Yeah.
So I've found that I pants series and I plot standalones. And that seems to be working for me. I've got a new method that I'm using that I'm a huge evangelist for. 40 scenes. If you can write down 40 scenes that are going to happen in the novel before you start writing it, if you do the math, if a scene equals 2,000 words, that's 80,000 words of your novel right there. I'm like, okay, writer math, but I like math like that. That's cool. So I tried it with my the book that I'm working on right now, and I'm astounded at how quickly the process is going, having this many scenes up front. So I'm kind of a combo platter of plot and plan and pants and let everything hang out and see what happens.
I love that.
It just depends.
Yeah.
It just depends. Again, there are no rules, and every book is different. Every book I approach it differently, and every book reacts differently to the process.
Definitely.
So I'm learn not to try to force one way or another on it.
Ooh, I love that. I think it's great, that you've realized that different types of books require different things out of you. And I love that idea of thinking of 40 scenes beforehand. I feel like that is revolutionary. I'm going to try it. I like
it's
that.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I hate the idea of outlining, right?
Yeah.
Of sitting down and going, okay, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens.
No, thank you.
I mean, that's just, that way life's madness for me. That's just that's not how my brain works. So, but the scenes, it's really funny. I wrote the 40 scenes, and I've probably only used like 5 of them, and I'm 40,000 words into the book.
Wow.
So it really does work. It gives you a shape for what you're trying to do. And that's, I don't know, I'm an evangelist for this.
I love it. Well, yeah, I'm going to try that. I'm revising something now, but there's something else that I have like 38,000 words of that I'm needing to finish, and I might try and do that. Think of those scenes before I keep going on that whenever I'm done revising.
It'll help.
Yeah.
It'll help. I watched, I'm always interested in what I call other people's process, OPP, other people's process. And I love the masterclass series. And I watched James Patterson's masterclass, and I was really impressed by how he describes how he goes through what he's doing. And it is basically this 40 scenes. It's what it is. I mean, he just lays out, okay, this happens and this happens. This is a chapter. This is a chapter. This is a chapter. It's the same thing. Pretty cool.
That is very cool. I love it. Well, I'm glad that it's working for you, and I'm going to try it. And I love asking this question because, yeah, I mean, we all do things very differently, but then, there are some books that require different things of you, and it's good to just know that there are no rules. You can be flexible with yourself, but also, if you're not doing it the same way as your CP or another writer or some author you hear talking about it, like, that's okay too.
It's really important to remember. I mean, you got to do what works for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how I do it. It doesn't matter how Rose does it. It doesn't matter how James Patterson does it. You've got to do what is comfortable for you. Yeah. And that's the key to success.
Yeah. Because I know some of my writer friends that spend like 6 months on an outline. And, one author I was talking to, she outlines and doesn't stray at all from her outline. And I'm like, that's amazing. I can never do it. But I'm so glad that works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeffrey Deaver does that. He writes, hundreds of pages of outline and then goes back and follows it and does the book. And you know what? God, if I could do that, I would do it in a heartbeat. Yeah. But that's just not how my brain works.
I wish I could. I feel like that would make it so much easier on the revision side, because revisions sometimes can, be really difficult. Like, we were talking about a little bit earlier. And so, yeah, if I could just have it all outlined and figured out beforehand, that would be easier. But my brain, if I outline, is like, okay, you already wrote the book. You don't need to write it anymore.
Right. It just takes a little bit of the fun of discovery. Yeah. Out of it for me. I do love, like I said, my favorite day are the ones when I sit down and end up somewhere else than I was planning. Yeah. And that's, there's still room for that inside of outlining. I know that, but I just like it a little looser.
Me too. But you know what? That's the beauty of it. We can all do it a little differently, and we all end up at the same goal, having a book that's finished. Tell me a little bit about your revision process. So obviously, you have your wonderful agent, your editors who work with you. But what do you do to make sure your manuscript is where you want it to be before you send it off to them?
So I I've got a couple of very trusted readers. And it depends on what exactly the project is, who gets to read it first. I've got contacts that I've made over the years of, professionals and different organizations, death investigators and FBI folks and, all that kind of stuff. So if I need to get a technical read, I do that. I have a couple of very trusted friends who I will show them the manuscript and let them give me an idea of, where I've hit the mark and where I've missed. And I trust them, you got to have people that you actually trust. My dad is one of my first readers. He's a really good reader. He's a reader in general. Right. So he has a great sense for when something's wrong. And so I will do a lot of talking things out with him to make sure things are right. And my best friend reads for me. I've got somebody that reads for grammar to make sure, I call her my comma cop. It's just different people that, need things. My husband always reads, though I try not to give it to him until it's closer to done. Because I don't want him to have to read it again if I make a major change to it. Yeah. He must have read the first 100 pages of my first book like 100 times. Bless his heart. That man, he really helped me out. But so those people get it. My agent gets to read it if I need. It's not something that I always run. I've just changed agents actually. So it's a new process.
Okay.
I've sent her my 40,000 words that I was doing on the new book, which is something I've never done before. She saw it before anybody else did.
Wow.
Which was really nerve-wracking, but she loved it. So that was good.
Yeah.
Again, every book is different. And so it depends on what it needs. That's what it gets. The book is king, not me as the writer. The story and the characters are king. They are the ones that get to make the decisions about what they need. So it's, usually by the time I'm sharing it with people, I either know that it's right or I know something's very, very wrong and I can't put my finger on what it is.
I love it. I mean, I think, that the important thing too is that you have found these people that you trust, whether they be, like industry professionals like you were seeing, or like your dad. Like, I don't think you should always have your family read it if you don't think that they're going to give you like real advice. Sometimes it is nice to just have a cheerleader who's like, yeah, this is amazing. But it's good to be like, okay, don't just tell me it's good, even if it's terrible.
Sure.
Like, make sure you're
have to,
being honest.
You have to find those people that, I'm just lucky that I do have parents that can be first readers for me.
Yeah.
But I don't often recommend that because you need people who are going to be honest with you, because nothing's right to start with.
No.
Nothing's ever perfect.
Yeah, it'll need some work regardless, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think having feedback from other people is really helpful in the revision process, because we get so deep into our stories, into the characters and the world that we've built, that sometimes, like you said, if you know something's wrong but you just can't put your finger on it, it's good to get some fresh eyes on it.
Yeah, for sure. And you should never be afraid to do that. I mean, that's people, again, just want you to succeed. They want to help. They want it to be great.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, my next question, it's not really a question, I guess, but I'd love to have you share something with me that your readers wouldn't know about you.
So that is so hard. I've been in the spotlight for a while now, and I'm very chatty. So people have a tendency to know who I am. But so my publisher actually just made me do this exercise, and I gave them several things. So I'm gonna cheat, and I'm gonna give you a couple of things I gave them.
Nice.
I can't touch type. I actually have to look at the keyboard.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really, everybody thinks it's hysterical, but I do. I have to look at the keyboard, and if I look up, man, I don't even know what's on the screen. It's not good. I'm much more of a jelly bean fan than chocolates.
Ooh.
Which I know.
Interesting.
I can take or leave chocolate. I have to be in the mood for chocolate, and that mood doesn't happen all the time. But God, throw a jelly bean at me. Not Jelly Bellies, not the big designer weird ones. I want the cheap, Publix version.
Yum.
They're the best.
What's your favorite flavor of jelly bean? Do you have a favorite?
I love, so I'll eat them in order.
Oh,
it's so weird.
I love it so much.
Actually, I'll eat like all the orange ones, and then the green ones, and then the yellow ones.
That's amazing.
And I'll work my way down to the whites and the pinks and the purples.
Ooh.
And the black. So some of them don't have the good licorice ones in it, but some of them do. So yeah, I actually do. I eat them in order.
That's amazing. I mean, that's the fact that
it's weird.
reigns over all. You're like my son with his goldfish. I have like the colored goldfish that he loves, and he'll break them all out into the colors and then eat each color as he goes.
Wow, see? I mean, it's a thing.
It is. It's a thing, for sure.
Learned habits from childhood.
Yes. Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those.
Share, but
it's always fun. Those are good fun facts. I mean, like, it's hard sometimes to think about those, but I feel like I learned something new today. So, I feel like you kind of answered this one already, like that you've always had a love of writing. But do you remember, like the moment you wanted to become an author? Was that when you were in college, or like did that love start when you were much younger?
Much younger. I was a kid. I was a really little kid. I wasn't a little kid. I was a very tall kid. But my parents, as I mentioned, are big readers, and the rule in the house was if I could reach it on the bookshelf, I could read it.
Ooh.
And so they never really limited me. So I read a lot of stuff I probably shouldn't have. That was not age appropriate. Like I read Roots when I was 8, and I read The Thornbirds when I was 9. Just not exactly the kind of stuff that everybody else was reading.
Yeah.
But it was my mom's Norton anthology of poetry. I loved it. And I read Tennyson's The Eagle, a very short poem. And the power and the imagery and the metaphor. I had no idea what imagery and metaphor were, but there was something so amazing about it. I grew up in Colorado. I was out in the woods. We lived on a dirt road back in the forest. And, so I had a very natural upbringing, the natural world around us.
Yeah.
And I think something about that poem, the eagle, he clasped the crag with crooked hands. Oh my God, that's just, you can see that. And that was it. That was the moment. I realized I wanted to try to use words to describe things. And I don't know how old I was, but I was young. So I started writing poems about the cats because they were the closest thing to me. So I wrote a lot of poems and little short stories, and I've still got a little book I did. I don't know how or the story behind it, but the title is the Samaritan Part 2. Ooh. I don't know what happened to Part 1, but it starts with Part 2 because I learned in media res very young. And it's the story of a guy who's left behind. I basically wrote The Martian when I was 8.
Yes. I love that.
It's hysterical. I think it was more Bowie's song that really kind of did it for me. But, Ground Control to Major Tom. I think that's probably what the inspiration was. Music has always been an inspiration, clearly.
I love it. I mean, I love that you have that memory of that moment reading that poem and realizing, the power of words and storytelling. There's so much that we can do with them, right? It's pretty magical.
Oh, it is. It's magic.
Yeah, it
Words
is
magic.
Are magic. Yeah, they are magic. Books are magic. It's the best.
Completely.
I have just one final question for you. It is a hard question, so I do apologize. I would love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't your favorite book of all time, because that's like a terrible question, but just something you've read recently that you really loved.
So I'm actually, when we get off of our call here, I am going to go finish a book by Chevy Stevens called Dark Roads, which is astounding. I'm reading A Galley, and it's out later this year. It's unbelievable. And I'm also reading a book from a writer who I've known for a long time. Her name is Paige Crutcher, and she just got her first deal after querying and writing books for years. And her book is coming out in the fall. It's called The Orphan Witch. And it's fascinating reading, because I read the very first draft of this book well before she even had an agent for it. And now it's gone through the editorial process and it's out for reads. And just seeing how her writing has taken shape from the editorial process, it just, I was up much too late last night reading that once I got into bed. So I'm really excited. So both the books that I'm stoked about are coming out in the fall. So Dark Roads and The Orphan Witch.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's probably you know, I mean, I know from just reading like my CP's work over the years and seeing how much they've grown, and, you know, I'm sure they feel that about me too. That's such a special connection. Are you like her John Connolly in her career?
I hope so. I mean, she gave me yoga and I gave her writing advice. So I think we're pretty even.
I love it.
She's my yoga guru. So, you know, it's been, oh man, that girl, I'm so impressed. She just stuck with it. She stuck with it.
Yeah, she persevered.
And now she's coming out with this incredible book from St. Martin's, and it's going to be a huge success. And it's just really cool to have been, you know, on the sidelines watching as she grew as a writer and got to this point. It's been very cool.
I love that. That's wonderful. Well, yes, we'll cheerlead her book. JT, thank you so much for chatting with me today and telling us all about your novel, Her Dark Lies, and letting me and my listeners get to know you as an author and as a person a little bit better.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. My very first, it's my second talk about Her Dark Lies. So
woohoo.
Thanks for letting me try it out on you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents. Please make sure you are subscribed, rate and review if you can, share it with your friends, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at RoseQuinny, QUINNY. See you next time.